Famer, Ms. Jackie McMullen. Welcome, friends. Coming up, we're going to talk about Kyrie Irving. He says the Nets look, quote, very average after the loss to the Pistons last night. What is the biggest reason for their 3-game losing streak? We will get into that. But first, there are a lot of great rivalries in basketball, but I would put what went on between the Heat and the Knicks in the late 90s up against any of them. The bad blood started when Pat Riley left New York to go run things in Miami, a move that led to tampering charges and $1 million Heat payout. And then all of that escalated as the teams met in playoffs 4 consecutive years. We got fights, we got trash talk, we got tabloid exploits, we got game-winning buzzer beaters, and yes, more fights. P.J. Brown flipping Charlie Ward over his head. Yeah, you gotta remember that. That turned into a thing there, right? And then, of course, the following year, the Jeff Van Gundy special. Personally, I don't think Alonzo Mourning's leg ever stood a chance, Jeff. You had that one. Yeah, really. Of course, these days, a Knicks-Heat game doesn't have quite the same kind of fire. The two organizations have followed such different paths the past couple decades. You can't even really call it a rivalry anymore. And yet, there was definitely a little crackle in the air when the teams met last night, the stakes on both sides feeling just a little higher than they did even just a few days ago. Over on the New York bench, it was Derrick Rose's first game since being traded back to the Knicks, a move that not only reunited him with the franchise, but Tom Thibodeau, who has had Rose on, every single NBA team he has ever coached. And last night, Rose paid that faith off immediately. He dropped 10 points and 3 assists in just the first half, looked comfortable in the Knicks' second unit alongside fan favorite Emmanuel Quickley. Meanwhile, on the other side of the court, the Heat saw this as a key opportunity to continue their climb back into playoff contention. It has been an extremely rocky start to the season for the last year's Eastern Conference champions, who have struggled to put a full roster on the floor, and last night were still missing Goran Dragic and Avery Bradley. Miami has used 16 different lineups in 24 games. It is hard to build much continuity that way, and they still look shaky at times against New York as both teams went on lopsided runs. And boy, were the on-off numbers with Jimmy Butler something to see. With Butler on the court, the Heat outscored the Knicks by 25 points. With Butler off the court, New York outscored Miami by 23. Good thing for the Heat then that Butler was there for the closing stretch that first saw Miami come from behind and then turned into, of all things, an old-school duel marked by physical defense and high-pressure trips to the line. Here was Heat coach Eric Spoelstra describing it.
This was more of a throwback Miami Heat, New York Knicks game from the 90s, where there weren't a lot of open shots in the last 14, 16 minutes of the game. And, it was just you're going to have to grind out a win, and in many ways do it, when you weren't scoring, So free throws were like gold in this game, and the defensive stops, down the stretch were inspiring.
Inspiring. Now, let's be clear, things did not reach Alonzo Mourning, Patrick Ewing level physically out there last night. In fact, the closest thing to a flagrant foul turned out to be more of a spoof. Check out this tussle under the basket, bodies crashing to the floor. And Jimmy Butler stays down, holding his head, except he can't help himself as he peeks out with a little smile to see if the cell job is working.
I mean, I've studied Mark Wahlberg and how he acts so incredibly well. And I've taken a few pointers.
First of all, if Jimmy was really injured, he's not peaking. If Jimmy's really injured, everybody knows he's trying to get up and trying to walk it off. So the fact that he was down there for so long, just being Jimmy, I feel like that's one of those things of like one of the course of the game, it lightens the mood. Everybody gets a break, a mental break from being serious for like 30 seconds, and then we lock back in.
Look at that smile as he popped back up. Butler would not get the flagrant call, but he made one of his free throws to give Miami a 2-point lead with 6 seconds to play. And while R.J. Barrett actually had a pretty good chance to send this game to overtime, just could not put the ball in the hoop. Another Heat-Knicks game in the books. And no, it's not really a rivalry again yet, but sure is something fun. And in 2021, that's enough. Perk, 3 in a row now for Miami. Do you think they will rebound from this slow start?
Absolutely, Rachel. And the thing that the Miami Heat has is that they have culture. Okay, they have an identity, and their identity is that they're going to put their hard hats on every single night, hang their hats on the defensive end. They're going to get good ball and player movement. As long as they have their two all-stars and Jimmy Butler and Bam out of the Bayou. Yes, out of the Bayou. You know I messes up his name, so I kept it this way. But as long as you have those two all-stars on the floor, I think the Heat are in great hands. They have a great coach in Eric Spoelstra, and they're going to continue to fight. They have great leadership in the locker room and on the bench, and Udonis Haslem, who's the captain. I have no worries about the Miami Heat. I feel like they will be in the thick of things come postseason time.
So I would wish they'd rebound the ball a little better, though, Perk. I think you would agree. I think they're dead last in rebounds per game right now, and that is a measure of toughness. So maybe that'll straighten itself out. So many lost bodies, COVID protocols, all of these things, Rachel. And, you know, if you looked at last year in the bubble, the team you thought was going to have the hardest time coming back from that short break, it had to be this team.
Yeah.
Because of the heavy, heavy minutes that Bam played and that Jimmy played and Hero and Duncan to a certain extent. So if there was one team that you would point to that say, hey, they might struggle a bit, this was probably the team. And Bam is an immensely talented player, but let's be honest, the heartbeat of this team is Jimmy Butler, and he was missing at the start of the year, and now he's back. I'm sure he'd like to get a little more into rhythm. He's not shooting the ball quite the way we saw it in the bubble. I hate to keep referring to the bubble, but what have you done for me lately? That's our league to some degree. So I do think they're going to come around, but I do think that for all the teams that started slow, including someone like the Mavericks, there might be a little bit of a price to pay here going forward because it's a shortened season, right?
Yeah. Right. Every game is 1 out of 72 instead of 1 out of 82. Now, there are the playing games, right? So it gives you a little more movement in the standings. If you ended up in that 9th spot, it doesn't just mean you're out. It is interesting, though. This is a team that feels, and I said this the other day, they feel like they can play from behind. They can play from behind within games. We saw them do it just last night. And in fact, they showed last year they can play from behind even in the playoffs or in a season because they were the lower seeded team and made their way through the bracket as the underdog going up all the way to the NBA Finals. So having the confidence to know you can do that will serve this team well. But of course, Eric Spoelstra will be the first one to tell you, you don't want to depend on that because after a while, it's exhausting to play from behind all the time, both in games, in series, and in a playoff bracket. You want to sometimes have the advantage. We will keep watching them. All right, I want to get to the Nets guys who lost to the Pistons last night. They were without KD. He won't be back until this weekend because of those COVID protocol issues. But they also gave up 122 points. Kyrie disappointed after the game. Take a listen.
We're seeing it day in and day out where teams are coming in and punching us in the mouth early, and we're playing catch up. I don't think that we go out every single day of our lives and sacrifice the time in order to be average at anything. You know, I know you don't wake up. I know no one here on this call wakes up to be average at anything that they do. And we look very average, you know, and we have the talent that the eye test presents that we should be dominating. You know, we have the experience in terms of some of our guys that have been through certain things, circumstances to be able to battle through. And we're dealing with a lot of the reality that we're putting this together on the fly. Like we are the team that the NBA put the most games on. We're the team that gets someone taken out during COVID, during the games. We're the team that has to deal with the refs. We're the team that is literally battling against so many odds that at this point it's not even a reason to continue to comment on them. They are what they are. And as a warrior that I am and that the energy that I have alongside my teammates, we just have to turn that corner. And we haven't done it yet, but we will. And I'm telling you, the league's going to be on notice when that happens.
Pretty candid there from Kyrie, Jackie, and also a little thing at the end. The league could be nervous when that happens. The Nets have dropped 3 straight. What do you think is the biggest reason for that, and how much of it is, hey, Kevin Durant's not there right now?
Rachel, I feel like a broken record, but I think everybody that's been talking about the Nets says the same thing. It goes back to the defense. Since they traded for James Harden, they have the worst defensive efficiency rating of any team in the league. These guys are supremely talented, but when you let your guard down and play sub-500 teams, to think you can just outscore them every game, that's not going to work. Do you realize they allowed the Detroit Pistons to shoot 70% in the game last night from the paint? You're not going to beat any team when you allow that. Do they miss Jared Allen? Yes, they do. But he's not coming back. So start shoring up your defense if you really want to win a championship. It's time to do it now. Stop talking about it and do it.
Well, you know, it's a lot of things that come from Kyrie interview. It's a lot of things that I could dive into when I look at the Brooklyn Nets. And Jackie, you're right. They can't stop a nosebleed defensively. But when I look at them, Rachel, and I look at this Brooklyn Nets team, is one word that sticks out to me, and that's accountability. Because when you look at all the teams that formed the big three or went on to go on and win championships or be contenders, they bought in defensively. And it started with the stars. Even when I was in Boston, Paul and Ray Allen wasn't considered top-notch defenders, but they bought in defensively because they knew the ultimate goal was to win a championship. So I get it. They may not have the personnel defensively, but it has to come from those guys holding each other accountable, along with Steve Nash and his coaching staff holding them accountable. And look, I'm not in the film session. I'm not in the locker room, but my eye test tells me from playing with superstars and being on championship contender teams and winning the championship that it's a lack of accountability there. And when you watch teams like the Lakers, the Bucks, the Utah Jazz of the world that are at the top of the charts, that are hanging their hats on the defensive end, you can see the separation. You see guys like LeBron James, Donovan Mitchell buying in defensively and being the head of the snake on the defensive side of things. So that means to tell me that they're getting held accountable. And I'm watching this Brooklyn Nets team, and they lack accountability.
Well, Perk, though, all those teams you just named are groups that have largely been together for a while. And you know as well as anyone how much continuity helps in this league, especially in this season where everything is kind of thrown up into the air. You heard Kyrie mention all of the ins and outs and stuff that they've had to deal with. They are, of course, not the only team in the league that's had to deal with COVID absences. We just talked about the Heat at length, but it is something that is a factor in what is going on. I'm very curious to see if they bring in more help because their trade deadline is March 25th. There's certainly an opportunity for them to bolster that roster defensively, and you have to think there's going to be some players around the league who might be interested in joining this team as well. So we will find out how that goes. Guys, coming up, we're going to take a little look at Josh Jackson's double punk dunk last night. It got Professor Bodmer in the lab cooking up the Jump's greatest double pump jams. It's going to be a lot of fun. First, though, here's a distant replay. This date, 2002, Kobe Bryant showing out at the All-Star game.
Kobe Bryant outside left, leans over the dribble, quick move to the left.
You know he wanted to have it look good.